Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Extreme weather could kill more than 150,000 Europeans a year by the end of the century. Scientists say heat waves, wildfires and floods could combine to cause the unprecedented number of deaths. Well, this summer, much of Europe is already sweltering in the grip of a major heat wave, with temperatures as high as 47 degrees registered in Spain. Well, our correspondent Charlotte Lomas has been looking at this research for us. Hi, Charlotte. And I have to say, these figures incredibly worrying, even more worrying the fact that Europe is already going through a major heat wave right now. And what have you found out about this research?
Yeah, perhaps offering a sign of things to come. Leading scientists have today issued stark warnings about what's likely to happen if nothing is done to try and tackle climate change and improve our protection against weather-related disasters. And there's been a new study published in the Lancet Planetary Health Journal. And the scientists there have used 7 of the most dangerous weather-related disasters and forecasted what could happen in the future. Let me just take you through some of their findings. Scientists have predicted that heat waves, wildfires, storms and floods could kill more than 150,000 Europeans every year by the end of the century. That would be an increase from an average of 3,000 weather-related deaths a year between 1981 and 2010. Climate change accounted for 90% of the increased risk from weather disasters, with population growth, migration and urbanisation responsible for about 10%. So really what the scientists are calling for is a unified response to try and reduce greenhouse gas emissions now, and are keen to stress this is on the individual and we need to act now to try and tackle this.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. This is looking at what the weather's going to be like at the end of the century. Well, as I mentioned before, we're already seeing extreme weather in Europe right now.
Yes, we are. We're into days now of this extreme heat wave. It's the most intense heat wave that Europe has had in more than a decade, and it's caused major wildfires, as we can see there in Spain, and has led to temperatures soaring well into the 40s. So there's been a lot of health warnings been issued by authorities. We know that at least 2 people in Romania have died already. Dozens more have been taken to hospital, and everyone now, tourists and residents, are being urged to take precautions because it is extremely dangerous. They've been urged to stay indoors, keep away from the sun, keep hydrated. We can show you some pictures of some polar bears in a zoo in Budapest, and they're using extreme ways, having an ice cube bath there to try and keep cool. But obviously it is a serious matter, and there have been, as I say, calls to really take heed and precautions to stay cool.
Yeah, pretty much, and follow what that polar bear is doing. Stay cool, as you say, Charlotte, and thanks so much. Thank you.
Extreme weather is one of the biggest global threats to human health, scientists have warned, declaring that without urgent action to tackle climate change, by the turn of the century, up to 152,000 people in Europe could die each year, most of them because of intense heat waves. All this as much of Europe swelters in the hottest weather for more than a decade, with temperatures hitting 44 degrees Celsius. Jane Deeth reports.
Cooling off in Romania, one of 11 countries which have issued extreme heat warnings. As the mercury hit 42 degrees Celsius in Bucharest, people have been fainting or suffering heart attacks in the boiling sun. Medical tents are providing water and health checks.
I can't walk home anymore. I need to stay here for a couple of minutes. I feel like I'm going to faint.
It hasn't been this hot in Europe since 2003. Then 20,000 mostly elderly people died. Today, at Sarajevo's main hospital, young, fit people are being treated.
Even healthy people are coming here asking for help. They've been caught out by this extreme high temperature and humidity.
Scientists at the European Commission say in about 50 years, vastly more of us could be at risk from killer weather if we don't manage to stop global warming from greenhouse gas emissions. Weather disaster records showed that from the 80s till 2010, around 3,000 people a year in Europe died from heat waves and other extreme weather. But from 2071 to the end of the century, global warming might mean heat waves of 50 degrees C, and we could see up to 152,000 deaths a year. That would mean 2 in 3 of us could be affected by weather disasters. Southern Europeans will see most of the heat waves. In Northern Europe, we'd be more at risk from storms and floods. The scientists say their fatal forecast makes the Paris Climate Agreement to slow global warming more important than ever.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris promise, and America's just given the UN formal notice.
The United States of America officially today notified the United Nations that we are withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord.
Of course, we've had heat waves before, but this new worst-case scenario suggests that in future a lolly or a paddle won't help. The risk from the weather could be of a completely different order from anything we've faced in the past.
Well, a little earlier, I spoke to Paul Wilkinson, Professor of Environmental Epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I asked him what can be done to avert this apocalyptic prediction.
Some degree of climate change is now inevitable, and we therefore have to get used to the idea that we are going to live in a warmer world, a world of changing climate. And so for that, we have to build houses better. Air conditioning, we know, is quite effective against highest temperatures. But it means things like increasing shading, having greater cover, and also in transport systems. And it is something which is very important to try to reduce as much as we can. And that means we need to take much faster, accelerated action on reducing our emissions of greenhouse gases.
Is there any sign that governments around the world are grasping this problem? Or, I mean, today, you know, the US has formally pulled out of Paris, the Paris Climate Change Agreement. So actually, are you seeing the reverse, that governments, you believe, are not very likely to step up to the plate?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed picture. I think Paris was an optimistic note. It was a good agreement, and for many nations, agreeing to take big steps. The reality is the steps that are being taken at the moment are still not enough. We need to accelerate that, and collectively. And of course, it's unfortunate that countries such as the US are now pulling back from that commitment and losing their place of leadership on this issue. But I'm hopeful that enough nations have now realised the importance of it, and that it will continue.
We're seeing some pretty eye-watering temperatures in southern Europe at the moment. How much of that do you think is an isolated event, and how much do you look at that and think you're starting to see a pattern of the sort that is described by this study?
The study is showing that those 100-year frequency events will become much more frequency and effectively almost annual events by the end of the century, particularly in southern Europe.
Paul Wilkinson, thank you very much for joining us.
Not at all.